So I'm a pretty growth-oriented person, and one of my friends loaned me their action cam, and I figured I'd take some video and take some notes, see how I was doing. I spent most of the winter rolling, and unfortunately I figured that out pretty much as soon as I got on the water. Things were not feeling as solid as I remembered them being, so I knew I was going to see a lot of takeaway points of performance when I got to the video. But it also turned out to be useful for seeing some other stuff that I didn't realize when I was out on the water. So yeah, the goal of this video is to just pick out things that are useful for me, and if they're useful for someone else, that's great too. Starting out with a little pivoting in place here. It's one of my favorite things to do to relearn the stability points of a kayak, because you can use that climbing blade angle forward and back to provide support and, save yourself from going on the drink while you figure out where your 1, 2, and 3 edge are. One of the things I'm trying to bring into this year is more grace with the paddle in terms of not pushing the water as much as just, working with it. And I'm also trying to do more core initiation and everything. You can kind of see that here. Go on the back paddle, I actually turn and face my work a lot. Going forward, I think I actually have a lot of room to follow through in that twist. That's my primary takeaway here. My secondary takeaway is my edge stability is all over the place here. Only excuse is the water's about 35 degrees, so I'm not really looking forward to going into it if I end up going over. Jumping ahead a little bit, my edging improves. Still get use a little more stability, but I'm getting more comfortable getting reacquainted with the old horse and starting to look a lot better overall. Like I'm not getting between like a 30 and a 45 degree angle, just not with the consistency and the stability that I'd like. That said, the note about torso follow through and that board sweep definitely applies. And you can also see that on my right side I'm just not feeling as confident, though I am able to get there sometimes when I really focus on it. The next thing I work on is lateral sculling. A few things that come to mind immediately is that the paddle shaft is not as vertical as I think it is. Part of that is my choice to edge away. I know there's some consternation, and it seems to vary boat to boat as to whether edging towards or edging away gives you a more effective lateral straw. There's also the argument to be made that in a dynamic water environment, edging towards your blade provides a better place of stability between your boat and your paddle. But if you get hit by an offside wave, you're already edging away, and if you've experienced that, you know what happens next. So, in terms of what I'm doing here, I think the primary thing I would say is look for some more edge stability and maybe see if I can't have a bit more verticality in the shaft for efficiency. I do like that I'm working on torso initiation here, though I think there's room to have more of that in this movement. Looking into the next activity, I'm working on sculling for support. Part of this is just defensive paddling in terms of wanting to get reacquainted with the force of the paddle it takes to scull with a Euro, since I've been rolling with a Greenland paddle primarily. I'm also just getting familiar with the riding force of the boat, since I've been in more of a whitewater boat. Yeah, I know, it's weird, but that's subject for a different video. Anyway, and also just, working on that torso drive, finding the blade angle, getting that all synced up before I get too much further in the session and start putting my body over the water, and some more capsize prone maneuvers. There's a lot of tailway here, other than the water's 35 degrees, so, you could definitely get the elbow down in the water, maybe get the PFD in the water if I really wanted to try, but, yeah, 35 degree water, not keen to go that far and, maybe go even farther. I've been thinking about getting involved in instruction because I find it really rewarding to contribute to other people's growth as well. And looking at the ACA standards, part of that is just using strokes that I don't usually do that often effectively. So here I'm working on my running draw, and you can see I don't actually use it that often. I'm not really getting a clean slice back out in the water. My edging's all over the place. In terms of like coaching critique, like I actually might have been better off just starting with a flat boat, getting the running draw motion down, and then working on the edge. On the same principle, I also practice my lateral draw, and feedback's basically the same. Like to see a much more stable edge, and the slice out could use some refinement. Like it's clear I don't do this often. I haven't really gotten the muscle memory for how to slice out. I'm kind of slicing it out more like a rudder than a draw. So, it is moving me, but there's a lot of room to do that more cleanly. Do you see that with a little practice, I am actually getting a little more smooth. Getting better edge control, getting better blade control, bringing more stability and smoothness in the movement. This is probably something I should just practice more often, so if I have to demonstrate it, I can give a really good example of what you're supposed to do. So the next thing I worked on was one of my favorite flat water activities, neutral rudders. So the idea here is for a bow rudder or a stern rudder or a hang draw or a crossbow rudder, there's sort of like a home base position where our blade can ride through the water without really drawing the bow out or pushing the boat in. So we can kind of use that as a home base for whether or not we want to pry or draw the boat. So we just paddle, get up some speed, and try to find that neutral position in the water. Not sure why I started with a crossbow, but that's how I did it today. You kind of have similar notes of, looks like I'm getting a little wide of parallel. I probably could be a little more perpendicular with the paddle blade. But it also doesn't seem to be really drawing me one way or the other very much, so all things considered, looks okay. As I keep going, I extend the sequence into stern rudder, hang draw, and then finally bow draw. I could probably actually let the blade dwell more in the bow rudder position. My memory of being on the water was the boat felt like it was slowing down quite a bit by the time I got to the bow rudder position. And again, the blade could be a little more vertical, but by the time I'm getting to the end of the session, I'm actually getting pretty vertical on my right side. On my left side, I'm actually placing my front hand a little far out, so the blade is ending up farther away from the boat than on the right side, and that's what's kind of causing the angle offset. It doesn't seem to pull my boat from side to side here, but in terms of things I would fix, I think it's something where, having more symmetry would make it a little more predictable, and it's definitely a cue that I can take to work on. I do think there's a little value in having some space between the paddle and the boat, and that if you trip over the paddle, it gives you a little space to slice out before the paddle gets pinned against the boat and you perform a capsize maneuver. but it doesn't necessarily need to be a large space. You only really do that if we need to get support out of the stroke. We're just trying to be super efficient, trying to go for that vertical paddle shaft orientation. Speaking of tripping, I do have a little problem coming here towards the end where I feel like I'm just not hitting the bow rudder on my left side as well as I could. I'm playing around with the blade angle and that's not it, and I think what the actual is happening here is that position away from the boat is what I'm feeling. It's basically acting like a bit of a funnel and a brake. Pulling at the boat doesn't feel smooth, and as I twist to try to compensate for that, it turns into a bit of a pry action where I get a bit of a trip. So what do we do when things aren't working right? Obviously we obsess over them, so at this point I drop the rest of the rudders and just work on the bow rudder. So I really want to have that neutral position. Sure, you know, it feels really awful to go stick your bow rudder in the water and discover you're doing a pry and promptly flop over. So before we actually do bow rudder based turns, just get in that neutral position so I can have some confidence that I'm not going to trip over the paddle and be in 35-degree water. Unfortunately, it really doesn't get better during this session, so I think it probably comes down to that whole hand position thing and paddle angle we were talking about earlier. So the next thing I move into is the hanging stern draw. After a little limbering up, I really like stern draws for, you know, pulling the stern around. They're a lot of fun. Taking a sea kayak on a river, pretty useful, but just, you know, maneuvering stroke, it's a fun thing to have in the quiver. Just trying to warm up here and get that stern on lock. Yeah, looks like on my right side I'm actually getting an okay stern unlock, not actually getting a huge turn out of it, not that it's easy to get a huge turn with a stern draw, but I am used to getting a bit more of a stern draw. On the left side, not really getting practically anything. I'm going to keep working at it. This is something that's, you know, boat geometry as well as edging can make a huge difference on, as well as just your body trim forward. So, remember I was struggling today getting a forward body trim that would really help that stern glide across the water a little more by unloading it. You know, the combination of that and edging just was more of a struggle than usual that day. But with practice, it is improving. On this next one, I really get into the edging, feeling a little more comfortable with it. But as I get on that hard edge and the stern starts to go, I start to feel a little uncertain about it, and I open up the blade into more of a protective brace, ready to slice forward and catch myself in a high brace should that edge start really going. I'm really a big fan of that move in terms of being a protective stroke. But here, I think it's actually sort of a deficit in the skill. I want to build up the familiarity so I can just kind of ride that edge and have the blade more directed and moving the water underneath the stern than it is for coming out into that brace. And, yeah, you can see there, not only did I, you know, prepare for the brace, but actually moved forward in that brace, and, you know, that robs energy from maneuvering, so I think that's something that's just going to improve with practice. Like you can see here on this side, I do still have a bit of a angle for sweeping. But it's not quite as severe as it was before when I was really preparing for that brace. And I think the other thing here is there's room to get that paddle a little bit more oriented towards underneath the stern, which might help it swing loose. So, you know, a lot of body movements to coordinate between edging, tilting forward, and drawing underneath. But I think there is something to be said for just developing comfort and transitioning into that sliding stern. rewinding a year, I can remember going into that slide frequently sending me into a brace position, where here, yeah, it's making me antsy and I am, preparing to brace, but I'm not committing to the brace immediately. I'm actually like trying to ride through it, and that's a big personal improvement. So I'm pretty happy about that. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Maybe more to come soon.